we're going to talk a little bit about preaching in the midst of a crisis. We've had hurricanes, we've had flooding, we've had lots of different things that have gone on in our conference, and you just don't know when that's going to happen. And there should be a response from the church in a lot of different ways, and one response is through preaching. I was, as we were driving here with Ryan and Will, Bishop Williman, talking about some of these types of things, and I was actually bragging on our Bishop Harvey at how she has been so present and right there throughout a lot of things, and I just love that. And so being present and offering and sharing God in the midst of those difficulties, I think, is such an important thing. And for those of us, myself included, that haven't, I've only been involved in crisis like that at arm's length, right? I want to hear from, I want to glean from some of the experience that you guys have in those situations. So I just want to start off by asking you guys if and Thomas, we'll just start with you and move our way down to Tim. If you just kind of introduce yourself and what the crisis or multiple crises were that you've been involved in, and maybe where you were serving and all of that.
Sure. So my name is Thomas Hankins. I know many of you. If I don't know you, it's nice to see you and meet you. I am currently serving as the pastor at Bethany United Methodist Church in Comfort, Texas. And so obviously we were impacted by the flooding this summer. Not as devastatingly in the human metric as Kerrville and Hunt and Ingram were. But what I will tell people is we are downstream of Kerrville and Hunt and Ingram. And so there was a lot of psychological worry for days and days. And you don't live in Comfort without having relationship to Kerrville, without having relationship to people in Hunt and Ingram's and the surrounding Center Point, the surrounding areas. So it was a heavy toll, and preaching through it has been a great learning process for me. I know others here are going to talk about Harvey. I'll say that my preaching through it was heavily informed by the fact that I lived through Harvey. I was a member of a church in the Texas Annual Conference, and was stuck inside my house for a week, and my now ex-wife at the time was a pastor at First Methodist Houston, and so getting to watch her pastor and preach through a flood, and the church respond through just the devastation that was. We lived in downtown. We lived 2 blocks from the Houston Convention Center where the helicopters were dropping people off at, so that heavily informed my response as a preacher to the flooding this year.
I'm Laura Hewitt Becker, and I was the pastor at First United Methodist Church in Rockport when we became ground zero for Hurricane Harvey. I have lived off the coast of Texas my whole life, and so I know what life is about evacuating, and have been through lots of different storms, and when so Harvey was a new experience in terms of for me being at the heart of the devastation, and so what built up to that, the weeks that were just ahead, involved dealing with a self-harm issue with my daughter, and I was beginning to see that the hurricane inside of my house was brewing in a way that then colored this time of disaster. And so the day that we evacuated from Rockport, I was already in kind of some disaster mode. We'd finally gotten a safe plan at the school with my daughter, and was able to kind of get her situated. And then the call came that we needed to evacuate. So doing what I typically do is I take care of family, get them home, packing, whatever. I had a wedding to be held in Rockport that weekend. So I drove to the house where the whole wedding party was gathered. And we did a ceremony on Facebook and with the core folks, got them married, and then they started packing and getting ready to evacuate. And so once we left town, because I'm a big proponent of you don't try to be heroic about things that you're not qualified for. And so my response, at least at that time, was to do what they told us. And so we evacuated and were gone 2 weeks and stayed in Georgetown where we had a place to stay. And so it was several weeks after that, or it was 2 weeks before we could go back and actually see the church and the parsonage and those kind of things. And I can tell you more about when Wade gets to his questions. But in and of itself, I began to think of life at that time. My dad died a month after we evacuated. And so it was this season that I like to call the Job season of my life that I hadn't really experienced up until that time. That kind of trauma, disaster upon disaster upon disaster. And so that year was very interesting as a preacher, as someone experiencing all kinds of hurricanes, if you will. Hurricane Harvey was the one that was the easiest to deal with and to speak to, certainly throughout all that time, that it was the easiest one to put out in front of people. But that wasn't the only hurricane happening. And about 2 years later, after separation and anyway, other things were resolved and healed. But that's also, let me just say, so then going after Rockport to Leander, that first year of ministry in Leander, we were trying to get to know all your people that you're usually trying to connect with. And we went into immediate quarantine that spring. And then our children started doing the homeschool thing and all of that. So I like to frame disaster as, I know what a community at ground zero looks like when everybody's feeling the disaster together. And then it was like, oh, y'all just need to chill. It's going to be a while. Life is not going to go back to any kind of normal because this is a global disaster. This is not just the community along the coastline, Victoria, Houston, Texas. This is everyone on the planet. And so a lot of that language began to kind of resonate. Thank God when we got to Mason, I figured out that we have fires out there, and the flooding. So it's been quite the journey the past 12 years, I guess.
My name is Lamar Davis. I'm the Conference Disaster Recovery Coordinator. I'm new to Texas. This is probably the only safe place that I can say that I'm an Arkansan. Is that okay? Can I say that? There's a little game being played next weekend, and I hope I can still say that. I say that because most of my experience in disaster recovery came from Arkansas. I served as Deputy Chief of Staff for a governor there and did disaster response, emergency management, homeland security stuff. And so I saw tornadoes, I saw ice storms, we had a lot of floods, we had some seismic activity, all of those things, but nothing prepared me for what I saw in Kerrville. I'm a member of Kerrville First United Methodist, and on the 4th, I got the call that our emergency shelter opened up, and David and Beth were already there, and they said, I was living at the Methodist encampment at the time, and they said, if you don't hurry, you won't be able to get across the bridge. I don't know if you know how Kerrville is. There's a couple of low-lying bridges, but then they said Sidney Baker was the only bridge that you could get across at that time, and this was 8 o'clock. So I put on some clothes, ran down there. I've never in my life seen anything like that, like the water up in the trees. At the point that I got to Thompson Drive, the water was almost to the street. And think about that. Thompson's here, Louise Hayes Park is here, the river is down there. We got there, opened up the shelter, spent the first 2 days there in the shelter with the folks. To see them walk in and not know where their kids are. Part of our job was to go to Light on the Hill and to receive the families coming in. And my hat goes off to you. I'm not a pastor. I'm a candidate for ministry now, but I'm not a pastor. And I hope this doesn't change my mind. It might, but I don't know. Can't imagine what you have to do. Ryan was talking about preaching without notes. I'm used to responding to disasters with a podium and talking points. I've never been asked by someone, why did God let this happen, right? And trying to ask theological questions about the disaster. My hat goes off to you because in some cases you'll get those questions. And so, Wade, this is a very good topic. It's a great idea to have a preaching conference, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Tim Brewer. Is that on? Okay. I am now at Bend and Lomita in retirement, but I was in Victoria when Harvey came. I think it was Victoria where Harvey decided to turn around and go back into the Gulf and then come up into Houston. I too lived on the coast all my life, and I never evacuated my life until that. My son talked us into going to Austin for 3 days, and then we came back, and I was amazed at, I've seen been through a lot of hurricanes and seen the destruction, but the church showed up. We came back it came through on a Saturday, we were back on Tuesday. On Wednesday, a group from Arkansas said, "We're coming. Can we stay at your church?" So I said, "Sure." And they showed up with chainsaws and skid steers, and somebody else called and said, we got a truckload of supplies. Can you give them out?" "Sure." "Can we stay at your place?" "Sure. Hey, we'll come and build beds for you." And so we had 120 beds in our church. Somebody else said I'm from Umpqua. I was in the neighborhood. Can I help? And he showed us how to do case management and how to manage all the needs that were coming across. Unfortunately, The conference said, well, you're Victoria, you're doing fine, we'll go down to Rockport. So it was about, I think, 2 or 3 months before the conference got there. But they provided the case management and things like that. We had we had St. Vincent de Paul in our building also, besides. Our damage was rather minor compared to what other people were experiencing, but what I saw was that the church burst out with generosity. They gave up their space, they gave up their building, they gave their money. And we had a ton of people who just didn't qualify for FEMA, that the Red Cross was not helping, and we just became disaster recovery. And it's amazing to me, because I preach from the lectionary, how often the lectionary applied. It just became an illustration. And also, we reached neighborhoods that we'd never been before. We saw neighbors that needed help, and they came to us. And we had conversations and ministries going on all over the place that we didn't have before. And so it was amazing to see God's hand in all that, in making us a bigger place in the city.
Thank you, guys. There we go. Thank you, guys. So I have a question. I want to start us off with a question, and certainly anybody that has a question can ask. But taking it back to kind of the preaching task that Tim you touched on there, what can you help me understand the process and what was going through your mind? And we think about Easter and Christmas as being big Sundays and big days to you've got to nail this sermon. This has got to be a strong response. I can't imagine, because preaching that first sermon, or even if it wasn't a first sermon, that first spiritual response, if it was a prayer time together, can you guys kind of help me with what you guys were going through and preparing for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to incorporate a little bit of what was said. So at first, to echo what Tim just said, so in July, I had planned to start my summer series. And so I'd spent all of May and June taking questions from the congregation. And I was gonna clump them or, together and just do on theme and kind of just answer questions in the form of a sermon. That was gonna be my July. And then we got so many questions in August that it became, or so many questions that we did at July and August. But July 6th was the Sunday. And what do you think the most relevant question? I had planned this sermon series in May. And July 6th, we were going to start with why do good things or bad things happen to good people? And so that set the stage, like it was there. But then to what Laura said, it was, I was already wrestling with that question, being a Hispanic person in the United States of America in the year 2025, dealing with everything going on. I'm already wrestling with why are these things happening to us? Why are bad things happening to people who don't deserve it, et cetera, et cetera. And so I found that preaching moment was about the flood, but it also was about everything. And my first instinct, so I trained as a hospital chaplain. That was my first kind of ministry vocation. So that informed a lot of this too. And my first instinct going into the sermon moment, the preaching moment, was to steer against our very human instinct of having to make sense of this. Because there is no making sense of a flood that kills little girls at a camp. That is a losing game if you try and find a rational explanation for that. And so the question became, so what is a Christian response to this? If the Christian response to this is not finding some kind of rational explanation for why this happened, what is the Christian response to it? And if we have time, we can dive into that question a little bit more too, but I'll leave room to, yeah.
The preparation for me was, the circumstance, I was out of town for 2 weeks, and some of the ways in which, we prepare in South Texas is, I had taken computers or VoIP phones with us because we knew that wherever we ended up, it's very likely, you got to be prepared to stay and hunker down wherever you are. And so I set up office at my sister's dining room table. And so the practice was, one, just how do I find my people? Where are my people? We're all evacuated, and who's at home are only the first responders and city folks, and there was no communication going in or out. So unless you, it was several days before we heard anything about when we were able to get back to the city, and we didn't know where structure was going to be for me, and so the spiritual practice just began with writing weekly emails, updates, and sending them out, mass, MailChimp, so I had taken all of the capability to do that. So basically, if you called the church office, we started changing the messages on the phone and updating as quickly as we could get information from the city manager, who was a member of our church. Actually, it was his wife who would call me and let me know, okay, they got the satellite connection up. But we were so in it together at the moment. One of my thoughts was always, oh man, we're gonna have to tend to the grief. Everything's about tending to the grief in the preaching. And also, maybe preaching isn't what we need right now, because we can't even get together. And so devotionals were being sent out in a reflective way amongst all the other things. But the first few Sundays that I was actually in Rockport back, we didn't have a place to worship or gather. And so I invited my folks to meet me at the First Baptist Church that was able to have people in their building, the Presbyterian Church. I said, just pick one, come with me. And so then that morphed into what we ended up I called Worship Beyond the Walls, and we started having prayer meetings down at the bay. There were like 3 people the first time we did that, who brought lawn chairs, and we sat there, just watched the sun come up together and processed what was happening. So at that time, when I got the request or looked at some of the questions, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember what my first sermon was. Like, that is, talk about memory dumping. Like, there's a lot that I went back and I was trying to even come up with some kind of stimulus to, like, what was happening. But prepping I'm a lectionary preacher like Tim as well. And so, again, I did my normal thing, but everything colored that. But it took time before we were even able to gather for sermon. I mean, because I wasn't there yet, and my people certainly weren't. They didn't even have homes. Most, half my staff lost their complete homes. So there were bigger issues than, I just showed up. That's.
So I didn't, no messages. I didn't preach a message. I did have a chance to be with a lady. Her name is Andrea. I'll never forget that. Monica O'Donnell is my mentor, and she and I were there receiving the families, waiting for their children. I have a son who's 18. Her daughter was 17, and she didn't make it. And we were sitting there at the table, and I literally said, God, what can I say? I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking. My face was sweaty. And Monica said, just be present. Just be present. And so that's what I did. I'm here for you. I'm not trying to get anything. And I did talk to Bill Harris. We're becoming friends. And I asked him, I said, Bill, what did you say? And he said, John 20:13. And it's the story where Jesus comes and sees Mary, and she's weeping. And he said, Lamar, I use that to demonstrate how Jesus is with us when we are weeping. I didn't do a theological thing. I just wanted her to know, and these people to know, that God is with you. He sees your tears. He's there, present with you. So I think there's a presence theme there that I think is really important.
I was thinking that a couple of things that happened to me that made me think about our relationship as people with one another. One was the utter failure of institutions to come and provide adequate aid because they had so many rules. And the church made it personal. People came and said, this is what I need. Say, we'll get on it. We didn't say, well, first you have to fill out this form, then you have to be this to qualify, and then you have to be. But the other thing was the inequity of the community, because the lowest level of land was also the poorest people. And so a lot of the wealthy folks were very little affected or had insurance to take care of it. And the poor folks needed everything. And I remember the panel, the organization you get going talks about people's needs and who's going to provide it. And that happened in early fall. And then in January, we were still helping a lady who lived with her kids in the shed behind their house without electricity because their house was unlivable. And you realize that that's the kind of poor people Jesus was talking to.
Can I build off that and kind of throw a grenade? I know we don't have much time left, but maybe a small grenade into church response to disasters, and Lamar might throw a book at me. Yeah, that one right there. I had this thought in the wake of the flood this summer that was, like I said, informed by my response, or my lived experience in Harvey. I'll never forget the first day after Harvey, after the water went down, and coming out of the house, and people were just hugging people on the street, people you'd never met before. I walked to a taco shop and was in this huge line to get tacos because nobody had gotten tacos, for a week. And we were just hugging each other, and they were like, do you need stuff? We'll run it over, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this is what heaven could be like. This is what we could be like all the time. And and I lived through similar inequity in Houston, right? Where to this day, you can drive through neighborhoods in Houston that have piles of furniture after Harvey, right? My gut instinct, I think the preaching response after a disaster is as important in today's world, is as important as the institutional kind of resource response. Because what we experienced in the Hill Country was overwhelming resources and underwhelming spiritual processing. And I was so convicted that I started to preach this, and I had this thought that when a flood comes, it knocks down everything. It knocks down everything, including the walls of sin and hate that we have built up between us. And the houses will get rebuilt. The community buildings will be rebuilt. It is up to us whether we decide to rebuild the walls that aren't Christian walls or not. And so it was really important to me to preach that the Christian response to this disaster will bear its fruit a year from now, 5 years from now. It will bear its fruit in the way that life is lived in the Hill Country, being different because the Christians are different. The Christian response to the disaster in the Hill Country is not flood buckets. That's part of it. We got donations from not Christian groups. You don't have to be a Christian to donate financially to the disaster response. So what is it that is unique about our response to this? And it has to be that we are transformed by the movement of the Holy Spirit, not just for a month after disaster, but forever.
I'm so glad you said that. Can I make one point? We cannot forget or overlook the disaster that has been going on since March in the Rio Grande Valley. It is criminal. I went there to Cameron County and I saw a house, and the person said the water was 18 inches for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I went there in August, and that was a story. I went back last month and had a similar story. And the resources are not there. The teams, would love to go to Kerrville, but like you said, we have a lot of resources in Kerrville. And I just want to make a pitch to you to pray, to go, to give, and to uplift our folks in the Rio Grande Valley. They are struggling.
Maybe it's the battery. I don't know. Oh, there we go. Thank you, guys. And we have just a short period. I think they probably have the lunch ready, but does anybody have just that question that's burning that they would like to ask our panel to respond to? We've got a couple. We'll allow a couple.
Hi, I'm Thea from the Texas Annual Conference. I'm curious about political disasters. How are you preaching now in the light of Charlie Kirk and ICE raids? How do we deal with those things?
Well, I can tell you that the political, social climate is horrible for disaster recovery. In Comfort, in Hunt, and in the Rio Grande Valley, we have people who are afraid to come out and get relief. Thank God we had a Spanish-speaking person on our team because someone felt safe enough to go. They had $500 in March, and they haven't had anything else. They were asking for clothes for their children and for food. $500 since March, and it was last month we were there. So the climate is horrible, and I'm not preaching, but I think God is leading me in the deacon route, which is social justice and reaching out to the community, and my plan is to hit that head on. It is no better time to be the hands and feet of Christ than today.
I think that one of the things is institutions are built, governments are built for maintenance. They're not built for disaster. and the people shift in and out, and there's not a collective memory of how you dealt with the last disaster. So they're struggling just like we are. They see the same things we do, and they want to help, but they don't know how. And like we got called from the city saying, can you open a shelter? And we said, well, we're a Red Cross shelter. Get the Red Cross to come over and provide people to man the shelter, and we'll be glad to do it. And the Red Cross never called. I mean, they're struggling just like we are to try to figure out what to do about it. It's always a surprise. And I think for a large part, they depend on churches.
Was there another question over here?
Yes.
Well, before that, can I respond just a little more directly to that question real quick? In that, it really doesn't feel that different, whether it's a socio-political disaster or a natural disaster. The process is still the same as preaching every week, in that what is God trying to say to God's people? And how do I step into that conversation? And you will know your community and when to press on the gas and when to not. But yeah, my going through those in pretty quick succession, those two massive events in American life this year, it didn't feel that different, actually.
Yes, Mary Ann Green from Cedar Creek United Methodist, and also a member of Bastrop County. And I've been through, not personally in those disasters, but as a volunteer, Katrina, Harvey, our complex fires, floods, all sorts of things. And you're absolutely right that the churches step in. People want to give. If we could just tell them what it is. After the complex fires, I spent a lot of time at our Lost Ponds Volunteer Fire Department, where 17 of those firefighters lost their own homes. And people would just give and give and give, but they don't always give the right things. And the more information we can give to the people who want to donate, so the right things get there, and then the means to get them back out to those people that won't come get them, or they don't have cars. And I've used my real estate office even as a drop-off point in Bastrop. They bring all this stuff in. One day, just a tremendous amount of camping gear got brought in. And within 30 minutes, we had the horse trailers, we had the flatbeds, and the Boy Scouts were there when they got there. They put them on the trailers. They were gone within an hour of hitting the door. So it is great, and communication, because just like what you were saying, if they would just show up, we could open the door, and then people would want to be there, and they wouldn't let them in. And that is a hard place to be in. Whatever that communication is that we can get from point A to B to get to C, even if they don't go through the right channels, is an incredible gift to be that conduit.
Thank you. One of the great things about this opportunity is that we're going to gather around the table, around round tables, and we have the opportunity to continue our discussions about preaching, about our response in various ways to disasters or anything else that we want to visit about. And we have, I believe, lunch is ready. I'm going to give you instructions in a moment, but first, can we thank our folks that are serving on the panel? What we have